learning how to read a chart with James Braha, we take up the chart of Barack Obama. On screen, we have Barack Obama's chart. As we go through this chart, we will see that the ascendant is Capricorn, and on the ascendant, we have Jupiter and Saturn. Both Jupiter and Saturn are retrograde. Jupiter is the lord of the 12th house and the 3rd house, Saturn being the lord of the Lagna ascendant, that is Capricorn, and the 2nd house of Aquarius. Ketu sits in Aquarius, and then we have Moon sitting in the 5th house, that is Taurus. Moon is the ruler of the 7th house of Cancer. We have Venus sitting in the 6th house, being the ruler of the 5th house of Taurus and the 10th house of Libra. Venus is sitting in the 6th house as in Gemini. Mercury is the ruler of the 6th house of Gemini and the 9th house of Virgo, sitting in the 7th house of Cancer. Sun, the ruler of the 8th house of Leo, sits in the 7th house of Cancer. Rahu again sits in the 8th house of Leo, along with Mars, which is the ruler of the 11th house of Scorpio and the 4th house of Aries. So this sums up Barack Obama's chart for us.
So this chart is of extreme intelligence and it has leadership, but it is not the typical horoscope for a president. It is not. You could see politics in there, but it's not the typical chart for a president. The US presidents are mostly where Mars is very, very strong. There's two kinds of leadership. In the ancient Hindu texts, it will say that Saturn makes a person leader of his village.
Mm-hmm.
And it's leadership by wisdom, not by force.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all US presidents are presidents by force. They all have Venus, Mars. They all have Mars, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Mars, Mercury. It's always Mars. They're always aggressive. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You have presidents like Jimmy Carter, who was not Marsy. He did not go to war with Iran. He had Saturn in the 1st house in Libra. So he was leadership by virtue of wisdom. And the country hated it. He actually was the first president to come out and say, listen, we are not living right. We need to tighten our belt, and we need to live the right way. And the people went crazy. The politicians went crazy because he was being introspective. He was saying, we need to be introspective and fix our problems. Nobody liked it because very few people like the leaders that are leaders by virtue of wisdom, which is Saturn. Obama's is more that way. In fact, one of the worst planets in his chart is Mars. One of the worst planets. Mars rules the 4th house, which is mother.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the 8th, strike 1. Okay.
Yeah.
But the real big strike here is that Mars is in the last degree of a sign in the 8th house. Yeah. So the ruler of the 4th and the 8th, the mother could die early. Now, don't go crazy, because not everybody who has the ruler of the 4th and the 8th, the mother could be psychic or metaphysical, but this one is bad because the 4th ruler is in the 8th, in the last degree of a sign. It has no strength. It has no strength. When a planet's in the first 3 degrees or the last 3 degrees of a sign, it's either going to be in the state of a baby has no power, or old age. But this is not just the last 3 degrees, but the last degree. And it's in the 8th house, and it's with a malefic Rahu. So the mother died early. But this tells you that in terms of being aggressive and assertive, the Mars is not helping him. Now, the Mars is helping him to speak aggressively, to go out and give great speeches, because Mars aspects the 2nd house. the house of speaking. So this guy came out and said, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to change everything they did, and we're going to change everything they did wrong. And then he got into office, and the liberals were disgusted. After about a year, they said, what happened to his speeches? He said he would do this, he said he would do that, he never did them, because Mars is not strong. So every time there was a problem, he pulled back. So there was he was going to do the right thing, but then some bomber came on a plane, and it was all in the media that oh, look, a bomber came on the plane, so Obama had to pull back. Now, if he had a strong Mars, like, say, Trump, he'd say, I don't care what they say, I'm going to do this anyway. But he didn't do that, okay? The brilliance in this horoscope is beyond belief. And he went to Harvard Law School, and the law professor said, I never had a smarter student. The moon in the fifth house alone, a person learns faster than anybody. So when I was teaching jokes, I came back from India, and after the second time, I started teaching. And I taught people that knew Western astrology, and it was like pulling teeth, because the concepts to me were simple, but they had a real hard time. If there were 20 people in the room or 10 people in the room, the person that would understand it quickly was the person with the moon in the fifth house. Okay. Now, he has the moon in the fifth house exalted in Taurus. It's past the highest degree of exaltation. It's past the third degree, but it's still exalted. It's still in Taurus. In the house of the mind, aspected by Jupiter within 3 degrees. So Jupiter is 7 degrees, the moon is 10 degrees. So this is a really strong, brilliant mind, right? On top of that, Mercury is enormously strong, because Mercury is 9 degrees Cancer, getting an aspect from Jupiter at 7 degrees Capricorn. So when Jupiter throws the aspect onto Mercury, it's throwing it onto its exaltation sign. If Jupiter was aspecting Mercury within 3 degrees, that's enough to make you brilliant. But it's aspecting it in Cancer, Jupiter's exaltation sign. I can't emphasize the intelligence enough. Now, the reason I say it's not a typical political chart is because the 10th ruler, Venus, is in the 6th house. That's the house of health and healing and things like that. Yeah. You could also say that Venus is in the 5th house, which is politics or kingship, because Venus is 8 degrees and the ascendant is 24 degrees. Some astrologers would say Venus is in the 5th because of the degrees. Some would say the 6th. When I was in India, I learned you have to do it both ways. Here's how I learned it. I learned it with Santanam. If he was looking at this chart, one day we would be looking at the chart and he would say, look at Venus in the 6th house. He'll have no enemies. He will overcome competition. He'll have no enemies because house. 3 days later, we'd be looking at the chart, and he would say, "Oh, he could be in politics because the 10th ruler Venus is in the 5th house." And I would say, "You said he was in the 6th house," and you go, "Yes, both." So a good astrologer will look at it both ways. But the moon, the 5th house is investments and speculations and children. It's purva punya, or past life credit. So he's known his wife from past lifetimes because the 7th ruler is in the 5th and very well aspected. And he'll do well with the public because the moon is the public. It's in the house of purva punya, well aspected. But the 5th house is kingship. Okay, so I wouldn't know this as a politician because Mars is not strong. I wouldn't know it's a politician. I really wouldn't. But if he mentioned politics, I'd say, oh, yes, you could be leadership and things like that. But again, the leadership is by wisdom, not by bullying. Okay? Now, Jupiter in this chart is terrible. It's terrible. It's in Capricorn. It's conjunct with Saturn. Okay? This guy had the worst Justice Department in decades. This man said, we are going to protect the whistleblowers. We were thrilled. We were thrilled because George Bush didn't care about that stuff. W. Bush. He didn't care about, he didn't care. He said, we're not going to, right? When he got into office, he prosecuted, are you listening?
Very much so.
He prosecuted more whistleblowers than all the United States presidents combined.
Oh
Combined.
my.
Yes. Oh my God. So what this means is, if you go and look, if you Google the people he's prosecuted, every time someone would come out and say, there's a problem here, there's a problem here, his Justice Department would go after that guy, throw them in jail, leave them in jail, give them harsh sentences. Now, I'm telling you this because you have to understand astrology. I don't care whether there's good presidents, there's bad presidents, but this guy was brilliant, he's intelligent, but he wasn't much of a leader in terms of pushing. He was more of an organizer, and he did a lot of good. And he was, he for 8 years, he kept the country in balance. He didn't do crazy things. He could be respected, but his flaws are from Jupiter. So the Justice Department was not good. And if I had him in a room, and could ask him anything, I'd say, why did you prosecute the good guys? And that would be Jupiter. And he'd have an answer. I'm sure there would be an answer, but I wouldn't like it. To me, that's an afflicted Jupiter. So
even if it's retrograde, because they say that a retrograde debilitated planet acts as an exalted.
yes, and read the horoscopes for your clients and tell them that. And you will be wrong 8 times out of 10. Now, here's why. It's because of the way, in my opinion, it's because of the way, it has to do with the Hindu culture, okay? So everything I find in the scriptures is exaggerated. It's not wrong, it's exaggerated. So this is the reason Hindu astrology could not come to America. Because before I went to India, I would pick up a book and I would read Saturn in the 5th house. I have Saturn in the 5th house. It would say the person will be found roaming in the jungles, having lost his mind. Okay? Then I would read Saturn in the 3rd house. The person will have lost 2 of his fingers. So what is this crap? So you come to find that if you don't exaggerate it, Saturn in the 5th house can make a person depressed. The mind can be heavy. It doesn't mean they've lost their mind. It means, okay, the person with malefics in the 3rd house, he hasn't lost his hands, but he may have some problems with the hands. Now, if I had a fallen planet, would I rather have it moving forward or retrograde? I'd rather have it retrograde. Right. It wouldn't do as much damage. Is it exalted? No way. No way is it exalted. It is better. But if you read it as exalted, you will be wrong for your clients 8 out of 10 times. 2 times out of 10, you might be right. Because astrology is not 100% anyway. It's too difficult. So this Jupiter, even if it was exalted, being hit by Saturn that close would be doing a lot of damage.
Okay.
Now, the breaking of boundaries. If you pick out horoscopes of people that went way beyond the norm,
right,
you're going to find they have Jupiter conjunct Saturn or Jupiter opposite Saturn. Right. Barack Obama broke a boundary.
Right.
John Lennon broke the boundaries of music. He had Jupiter Saturn conjunct. I brought Hindu astrology to the Western world. There was one book written before me, 20 years before. It was called Constellational Astrology, but it was unusable. It had all the good mathematical calculations, but it didn't teach you how to use it. So when I learned it, I broke the boundaries here. When I did this book, this ancient Hindu astrology, I sent it to 3 publishers. They all said no. I said, why did you say no? They said, it's a great book. It's very readable, but the books on Hindu astrology, they don't sell. So I published it myself and I broke the boundary. I have Jupiter exactly opposite Saturn. Okay. You also have people like Ramdas. No, I'm sorry, Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary. Jupiter conjunct Saturn, or Jupiter opposite Saturn. I can't remember, but it's one of those. Mary Baker Eddy with what's it called? The Christian Science. Christ had Jupiter Saturn. There's all these people that break boundaries with Jupiter Saturn, and let me explain why. This is really important because when you get a client with Jupiter Saturn conjunct or Jupiter Saturn opposite, those people feel terrible. Because I know I have Jupiter opposite Saturn, nobody gave me anything because there was no luck. Saturn would ruin the luck. So if I wanted something, I had to work for it. So when you have clients with Jupiter Saturn conjunct or opposite, they feel unhappy because they didn't get any luck. You tell them, you have the ability to break the boundaries. The reason you break the boundaries is because Jupiter represents your dreams and your visions. Your dreams and your visions. Most people, when they have a dream or a vision, it's a fantasy. Oh, I'm going to be a big rock star. It's a fantasy. Oh, I'm going to be a big president. It's a fantasy. If Jupiter and Saturn are conjunct, it's not a fantasy, and here's why. Every time they have a vision, a dream, as soon as the thought comes for the dream, oh, I think I'll bring Hindu astrology to the Western world, right? Then the thought comes into my mind of Saturn. Saturn comes in and says, wait a minute, is that possible? Is that realistic? And I go, yes, that's realistic. Other times I'll have a dream or a vision and Saturn will say, is that realistic? And I look at it and I go, no, that's probably not real. So the person with Jupiter Saturn knows, because from childhood, when they have a dream, something comes in and tests it. Okay?
Okay.
So they can break boundaries.
So we move on to the 6th house with Venus. As you said, he would not be having too many enemies because
people will like him. People will like him. Yeah. Yeah.
And we move on to the Mercury and Sun sitting in the 7th house for him.
Aspected by Jupiter in Cancer, and the seventh ruler Moon is exalted in the 5th. His wife is magnificent. His wife is magnificent, talented, brilliant. You know, and the quality of her as a person. It's just, that's his 7th house. That's his 7th house.
And Mercury, as his 9th lord, also the lord of the bhagya or the luck, is also very much potent for his wife. So wife is more lucky than he is himself, right?
What did you say? The Mercury ruling the 9th. That means the partner could be from a foreign country or involved in law or involved in religion and philosophy. The 9th ruler is law. It's foreign countries. It's religion, philosophy, and the 9th ruler is in the 7th. So all of those can pertain to her. She also may be bossy or strong-willed because of the sun.
And she definitely is. She comes across as a very strong personality.
Very strong, very strong, very powerful, very brilliant, very strong. Yeah.
And very ethical and moral oriented person also. She takes up a lot of issues on moral grounds also.
From what I know of her, 100%. 100%. Not 70 or 80. You can see it in the chart. The 7th ruler is exalted, aspected by Jupiter. The Sun and Mercury, aspected by Jupiter tightly. It's magnificent. Magnificent.
And finally, we come to Rahu and Mars in the 8th house. As you have already stated that Mars is one of the weakest planets of the chart. So how would you help delineate the 11th house and the 4th house?
Well, first of all, in terms of longevity, the Mars in the 8th house is not helping anything. And in terms of being sexy, it's not helping anything because it's weak. But it's fortunate that Rahu is there because now it strengthens it. Okay? I would say, I would say that, first of all, growing up, unhappiness in the house. Rahu-Ketu in the 2nd and 8th, or 8th and 2nd, is unhappiness in family life. So family life would have been disturbed, which it was. I mean, with the father and the...
we've read about it many a time.
Yeah. But this also means that when he is in his house, just living his life, not being president, there could be a lot of issues coming up in the marriage. Now, married life is very good because the 7th house is so strong. It's really strong. But there would always be something to talk about, work on. You wash the dishes, I wash the dishes. You have to do this. There would be some ups and downs going on there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The 11th house is not strong because the 11th house ruler is Mars. So there's no eldest siblings that I know about. Maybe there's half siblings or something, but there's nothing there in the 11th house. It's a weak house. I don't know. I don't have too much to say about the 8th house, except that it indicates a difficult childhood, a difficult,
family life.
Yeah.
So your 5th house, as you said, has an exalted moon. So his daughters would also do well in life.
Oh my God, yes. Now, there could be some weakness or some difficulties in the children's life because Jupiter and Mars are the most afflicted planets.
Mm-hmm.
Like he got in trouble the same way John Lennon had Jupiter, Saturn,
mm-hmm.
and he had them in a bad sign, Jupiter conjunct fallen Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
And John Lennon made a statement at the height of their fame. He said, "We're more famous than Jesus." And the religious people came after him. It was bad. And when Barack Obama, he almost didn't make it to the presidency because his pastor, his preacher, had said negative things about America. That's his Jupiter. So, so I was going to say, the sun represents the father, and the sun is very strong. But the father was not much in this guy's life, okay? And it's hard to know, why that would be. But one thing I can tell you, that the thing is, I find it hard to delineate someone's father because sometimes the 9th house is the father. In South India, they consider the father your guru. And so in some sense, the father is the 9th house. The father is also the 10th house for sure. The 10th ruler is Venus. It's not so strong being in the 6th house. The 9th ruler is Mercury, which is very strong because of the aspect from Jupiter.
Yeah.
But a hint is that I also look at Jupiter.
Okay.
I also look at Jupiter. Now, there's a lot of different opinions about how to do something, but how to do astrology. But I would consider that his Jupiter might have something to do with why he had so little contact with his father from the Jupiter, not from the sun, not from the 10th ruler or the 9th ruler so much, but Jupiter itself, I think, relates to that.
That's a wonderful observation, James. So with this, we will be back again with James for more on teaching us how to read a chart completely without getting way too weighed down with a lot of data, with a lot of intricate matters. Back again. Till then, take care and have a nice day. Thank you so much, James, for coming on my channel.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Thank you, James.